order, and I will start the meeting by apologizing to our witnesses. This is the time of year where this kind of thing happens more frequently, that we are disrupted sometimes by votes in the chamber. So this meeting is late beginning because of a rare Thursday vote, and looks like it will be cut short because of another vote. So I am going to. I have now called us to order. We're already beginning. I'm going to ask our witnesses who have all. First of all, I would like them to turn their cameras on. I invite the witnesses to turn their cameras on. Thank you to our witnesses. I would, in the interest of time, each witness here has prepared an opening statement that has been received in writing. I would like to receive those statements for the record to be included in the evidence as read, but dispense with the reading of the statements, so that we may have time for perhaps a full round of questions from parliamentarians. So, Greg, I see you with your hand up. I'll go ahead. If it was there.
I know this is on me. I had not read the witnesses' statements before the meeting. I actually would appreciate hearing them give their statements, sir.
We're not going to get you. You likely won't get to ask any questions if we simply have statements read. Time allocation's been moved in the chamber, and we're expecting bells to go probably in about 20 minutes or so. So my proposal is that if I end up with unanimous consent to take us partially into the period of bells, that we may get a round of questions in with our witnesses, and I want to devote about 3 or 4 minutes, hopefully tops, to also deal with some important committee business that can't wait. So, Greg, go ahead.
Given what you've just told us, sir, are we going to be coming back after bells?
I don't think that we will end up with. I think we'll be past 5:30 by the time we get back. If that would be my guess. So, Matthew?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a pretty significant concern that we're going to lose this portion of the study. And I'm just wondering through you to our clerks, I know that we had spoken about the potential for additional witnesses. This is an occupational hazard. This has happened from time to time. But what I don't want is to gloss over this very important element, given the impacts that it has on our communities. So I'm just wondering through you, Mr. Chair, are there opportunities to invite these witnesses back to have a full? Do we get a mulligan on this, or?
I can't. I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question. We've got a lot of moving parts with our committee. We may have time for another meeting where perhaps they could be reinvited. This is going to take up their time as well. But we're at quarter after. My proposal really is to give a member from each party to have 6 minutes and. See where that takes us, because we're likely going to be into bells by the time we do that. I'd like to go ahead and maybe give the floor to our first round and go from there. Hikra?
Thanks, Chair. I again, we wouldn't really have context of the questions that we want to ask if we don't hear from opening statements. So perhaps. Humbly suggest that maybe 2 minutes per witness, just to give them an opportunity to highlight what is really, really important to them, and then move on to the questions. I would really appreciate that, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that in your time that you would have the latitude to use it however you wish and turn it over for part of that. But there was a briefing note prepared by the analysts as well that maybe you can refer to as well for questions if that's what you'd like to do. I'm just trying to use our time as effectively for members and ensure that members have an opportunity, because otherwise you won't. And with that, I'm going to go ahead then. And Mr. Williams, you have 6 minutes.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses for coming today. I really want to focus testimony today on the facial recognition technology. And we've had witnesses in the past who've identified that this technology is widely inaccurate in identifying non-white individuals. So can you please just share with me how you're using that technology right now? And are you aware of that inaccuracy in terms of its use and how you're using that? And I'll start with who wants to answer that. I can't see everyone on my screen, Mr. Chair.
You can see up on the big screen there.
Oh, it's up there. Oh, good. I see their names. I'll start with, if I can, with Mr. Beaudreau, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. When it comes to technologies such as facial recognition, we do recognize that there are gaps in the technology, and there are biases that are inherent to those types of technologies. So what we're doing from an RCMP perspective is when we look at these new technologies, whether it be facial recognition or other types of technologies, we're looking at processes to include human intervention to assess any of these new technologies.
Okay, if I may, the witness's camera is not engaged. Okay.
No.
All right.
Apologies for that.
Okay, continue, please.
No, so you know, whenever you look at these types of technologies, I think you have to look at it from the lens of a legal, privacy, a gender-based analysis, a bias perspective, and as I mentioned, you have to have that human intervention as well. There are gaps in these technologies that we must assess and make sure that when they're used properly within, especially from my perspective, from a law enforcement perspective.
Thank you. And right now, are we using human intervention or human review with this technology as it stands?
So the RCMP is not using facial recognition technology as it stands, but when we did use it as part of our Clearview licenses, there was human intervention at every time there was results that were returned by the Clearview application. So yes, absolutely require human intervention.
And I'll go to Mr. Stairs from Toronto Police Service. Is Toronto Police Service using facial recognition technology right now? Oh, sorry. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, we are. We're using facial recognition to compare probe photos that would have been uncovered in an investigation against our IntelliBook, which is all of our mugshot database. There is a known set of issues around faces and different training sets. We selected the facial recognition technology we use because it is the least biased, but there are biases which are embedded into just photography and the photographic systems that are out there. The bias is towards lighter faces and having more of a detail range in lighter faces than in darker faces. So what we're doing is we're countering that bias by having a hurdle rate below which we don't consider a match. And so if the technology is weaker, then it actually does not disfavor the generally racialized minorities who have darker skin tone. And we're also feeding that into a process whereby a match is not considered an identity. The identity has to be corroborated by other methods.
And is that human intervention then that you're using, or what are the other methods that if you're misidentifying a racial minority, who's verifying that data?
It would be through the investigative processes.
Okay, and is that human?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So in terms of the data you're collecting from FRT, you're having human intervention every time or sometimes not?
Never not. Always there will be a human intervention.
Okay. Almost every witness who's appeared before this committee, academics, lawyers, civil liberties experts, have called for a moratorium on the use of FRT by police forces. Are you aware of this support for moratoriums?
I am aware, yes.
Okay. And at this point, are you considering that, or is that something that's been brought that should be happening with the police force until this technology is examined further?
I don't believe so. I think and this is how we've approached this with our AI/ML policies, is that there's a balance of goods around this. a social good around public security and safety against privacy and human rights challenges with the technology. So the question is, when do we deploy this technology? And for us, it's only in major crimes, major cases. We're not using this technology broadly, and we're using it where there's a significant benefit to public safety around the identification of individuals who are involved in violent crime.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boudreau again. Privacy Commissioner said that the database of Face's Clearview AI created for the RCMP was an illegal compilation and violated the Privacy Act. Has a member of the RCMP who authorized this illegal activity been reprimanded in any way?
No, and if we look at the results of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner and what the Commissioner stated, is we do not agree with the full recommendations or the findings of the Privacy Commissioner. However, we do fully support all of the guidance that's been provided and recommendations to the organization. So the RCMP has stood up since the report a new program called the National Technology Onboarding Program that looks at all new technologies. It's not just facial recognition, but any new technology that may have privacy or legal implications, looking at it from a legal, ethical, privacy perspective. So the RCMP believes really that the use of facial recognition really must be targeted, time limited, and subject to verification by trained experts. Further, facial recognition should not be used to confirm an identity, but rather only be considered as an investigational aid, where the results must be confirmed again by human intervention.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good for the first 6-minute round, and I'm not certain who is. Okay. Mr. Fergus, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to follow on what Mr. Williams said. So my question is for Mr. Boileau. Is it Mr. Boileau? I can't quite see who's representing the RCMP. Mr. Boudreau, apologies. You stated that the RCMP no longer uses facial recognition technology in your activities. Can you confirm that that is in fact the case?
Yes, so if you look at the technologies such as Clearview AI, the RCMP is not using any newer advanced facial recognition technologies. The RCMP inherently has used facial recognitions as part of our processes in the past. You can look at mugshots and those types of activities, but facial recognition technology per se, we are not. As part of the review from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, we did an exhaustive survey across the organization to try and discover any new facial recognition technologies that are being used. And we provided those results to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner.
Monsieur Boudreau,
So, and I apologize for interrupting you. You seem fairly clear in your answer, but perhaps I'm wrong, but I thought that with juvenile pornography that the Arachnid program used a form of facial recognition in order to identify victims. Is that true?
Yes, Project Arachnid actually runs out of the C3P program, not out of the RCMP, and they do use facial recognition technology. So we do work with partners such as C3P with regards to child exploitation, but that is not an RCMP-led activity.
Ça soulève une question.
This raises a question, Mr. Boudreau. Are there other partnerships where your partner would be using facial recognition technology?
There may be. I am not aware of other technologies out there. The one with Project Arachnid is significant because of its profile with dealing with child sexual exploitation, and we have a strong working relationship with C3P. But outside of that, I am not aware of other technologies being used by the organization.
Si je peux demander
If I could ask the chair, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Boudreau, could you verify this with your colleagues and identify all of the partners that you have that use facial recognition. And if you could send that information to the clerk in writing, that would be great.
Yes, that can be achieved.
Merci.
Thank you.
Would be for the Toronto Police Services and whoever would like to answer this question. Again, in a similar sentiment to Mr. Williams, I'd like to know if you could provide us in writing, or if it exists, are the policies that you use to determine when would you use and when you would not use facial recognition technologies. Would that be possible, or would you be able to give me a quick 1 minute summary in terms of some of the guiding principles in which you use?
Mr. Chair, if I could respond to that. Along with my opening remarks, I also submitted the Toronto Police Services Board's recently approved policy on the use of AI, and that encompasses also any use of facial recognition. It details anything that uses facial recognition or other biometrics is considered a high-risk technology, and therefore will require considerable reviews in advance of deployment, of adoption and deployment, and a follow-up over at least 2 years, to examine any impact, including any unintended consequences. So you should have a copy of that with you, and that details all the different aspects that are looked into and the concerns and the guiding principles in deciding whether or not a certain technology may or may not be approved. That includes issues of fairness and reliability and the legality of that use, as well as the requirement that there will always be a human in the loop and personal and organizational accountability for its use.
And I see that Mr. Stairs has a way to or additional comment to make on that, I assume, with his hand up. But if I could just ask both of you, because my time is running down for me to ask this question, what recourse does the public have, especially members of the community, people of color, who, as you know, as we all recognize, it seems to be today, that the limitations of this technology, what recourse does the public have to ensure that their images are indeed, what are their rights in terms of how you assess the efficacy of the use of facial recognition technologies?
So I'm just going to respond to the first question. We can supply the forensic identification services policy on facial recognition at what qualifies for that. There's a fairly stringent set of criteria, and we can supply those separately. In terms of the rights, we're operating under the identification of criminals, and so we're only using images from mugshots, essentially from arrest and processing, and so there is no use. And obviously, the Clearview was a blip in that. There is no use of public sourced images, facial images for our facial recognition program.
And
if I may add to that, Mr. Chair.
We're considerably over Mr. Fergus's time, so I'm going to have to go next to Monsieur Villemeux pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kenengisser, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, could you share with us the pros and cons of the use of facial recognition when we're talking about freedoms?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. It's hard to discuss very broadly the issue of facial recognition without the context of the particular use. There are definitely many concerns that you've heard throughout these discussions. There is also the obvious benefit to successfully cracking cases and identifying victims and rescuing them in cases of abuse. I don't think I can give a clear answer without a specific context. And the policy that the board approved recently was really setting the groundwork for having these discussions and requiring the service to provide a business case, basically, and justification that would prove that they are balancing effectively the risks with the benefits, and are mitigating those risks in a way that lessens and minimizes any kinds of impacts on privacy and freedoms.
So we know that there are pros and cons. In the public consultations that you had held recently, what were concerns shared by participants?
There were two kinds of concerns. Well, there are a few concerns, but I think the greatest ones had to do, as we've discussed here earlier, with the misidentification of individuals, and also from the contrary side, where the technology is effective with basically mass surveillance and unreasonable levels of surveillance over people just going about their business. So both of these concerns were important. The ability of a person to go around town and not be followed around using artificial intelligence and facial recognition technologies is something that we are concerned about, and this is something that will be prevented through our policy.
Est-ce que
Does the use of FRT, is it supposed to increase security and safety, or just the feeling of security and safety?
Through the chair, I think neither of these will be the correct answer. It's supposed to help law enforcement identify perpetrators and identify victims to help them carry out their duties. So whatever duty that you believe that law enforcement has, it is just another tool in their belt to carry out those duties. It is. I don't think the expectation is that their safety, actual safety or sense of safety will be impacted directly just by having those tools available.
Merci, Monsieur Stairs.
Thank you. Mr. Stairs, the same question on pros and cons, and when we look at individual freedoms.
So I agree that what we're looking at is mostly an after the fact investigative tool. And we are not looking at surveillance or upstream of event types of facial recognition, which would be very intrusive. And in that state, I don't think we're having a significant impact as it stands on rights, because we're following similar processes at similar scales to existing processes. When I think the public thinks of facial recognition, they think of TV shows and movies where every camera, it has facial recognition applied to it. What we're doing is taking crime scene photos gathered from cameras that would be recording the street regardless, taking a still from that and comparing it to the mugshot database, which is very similar to witnesses giving testimony. So this is not a significant change.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Coming back to Mr. Kanengisser, what would be unreasonable in the use of facial recognition technology? What would be unreasonable?
Thank you. Anything that falls under mass surveillance would definitely be unreasonable. Tracking people en masse without any discrimination, indiscriminately, I mean, would be considered unacceptable to me and to the board based on their decisions. as well as any use of technology that can be shown to be inaccurate, leading to significant misidentification and all the harm that could lead to a person getting arrested because they were misidentified by a software and that wasn't confirmed by a human, that would be unacceptable.
Je prendrai juste 10 secondes de votre.
I just want to take 10 seconds of your time. People who participated with the public process, did they trust the process or not?
Some did, some didn't. I'm afraid that's the way these things goes. Conversations that I've had with
I'm going to have to leave
participants-
leave the answer at that. It is time now for Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Mr. Boudreau, I heard you state in earlier testimony under questions from Mr. Williams that you didn't agree with the Privacy Commissioner's results and findings. And in fact, if I believe I understood correctly, there was no disciplinary process through which those responsible for this breach were held to account. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the RCMP appreciates the recommendation.
Under the RCMP Act, Mr. Chair, if an officer were to access unlawfully CPEC, for instance, to look at information relating to people unrelated to a crime unlawfully, what would happen under the RCMP Act in terms of disciplinary processes?
Before we get an answer to that question, I'm obliged to interrupt at this point and ensure that I have unanimous consent. I'd like to hopefully finish Mr. Green's round, and then I've got a couple of very quick items that can probably be dispatched in a minute or two. So if there are no further objections, I will go to the answer to Mr. Green's question. Okay, hearing none, go ahead. We'll continue to finish Mr. Green's round and a couple of other quick items. Go ahead for the answer.
Thank you very much for the question. If the RCMP breaches a code of conduct, which having access to information is used improperly, we would go through the conduct process.
Why was this process not undertaken when the person was found to have unlawfully accessed these without knowledge of superiors?
Just again, the RCMP is in disagreement with the Privacy Commissioner in regards to its findings, in particular with Section 4 of the Privacy Act.
Mr. Chair, the OPC report also states that the RCMP first erroneously told the Office of the Privacy Commissioner that it was not using Clearview AI. Why did the RCMP deny the use of the technology to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner?
So the RCMP at the beginning, when we initially responded to media inquiries to the Privacy Commissioner, it was not commonly known across the large organization as the RCMP that a limited number of programs and services had begun to use Clearview AI. When it did come to our attention, the RCMP did a fulsome survey to discover how this technology was used across the organization, at which point we instilled processes and procedures.
Here, at the highest level of accountability, who would have allowed for this and signed off on this use, whether in the procurement process or in free trials? Who ultimately signed off on the use of this technology? It sounds like the superior officers were unaware of this. So who ultimately is responsible?
So the RCMP constantly looks at new and emerging technologies, and it's part of our processes for which the divisions, which we have a very large organization, looks and evaluates new technologies. So what we've done to capture these activities is we've created a new process called the National Technology Onboarding
Mr. Chair,
answer because
I'm not actually interested in what they're doing now. I'm actually interested in what happened to get us to this point.
I just want to make sure he has enough time to answer the question. It was a 25-second question. I was just letting him answer. But
let me ask a more specific question, Mr. Chair, because in earlier testimony from Mr. Williams, I heard, and others, I heard that FRT was not used per se. Why per se? And I also heard that no new or advanced AI technologies were being used. So my question through you to Mr. Boudreau is, are any types or forms of FRT either old or not considered new and advanced AI being used currently by the RCMP?
So as mentioned earlier, I think facial recognition technology is very large, and I think we need to look at it as new technology. We've been using facial recognition within the organization for a very long time. When it comes to use of facial recognition technology such as Clearview, we are not using that type
Other
of
types,
technology.
Mr. Chair. What about other types of technology?
No, I am not aware of any other types that would fit the same bill as facial recognition technology. We also shared this information with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner after confirming its use within the organization.
Mr. Chair, we heard testimony from the RCMP that this was to be used for things like crime scenes and not as though we would see it on television with every camera having access to this. Is the RCMP using this for the active surveillance and capturing of mass protests?
No, it is not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, on to the Toronto Police Service. In my time as a city councillor, I fought vigorously against the practice that I consider to be racist in street checks and carding, in racial profiling, essentially. How is the Toronto Police Service's use of this technology not simply a more advanced and highly technical version of the same practice?
So the street check practice, Mr. Chair, is discontinued, but that is a
Need it now, Mr. Chair. Is that not correct? That there's no longer the need to stop and ask for information when you can simply take a photo and run it through a facial recognition technology. I know that, having been involved in direct action in my own city, that our local police are constantly there and consistently there taking photos of protesters. Does the Toronto Police Service also do the same practice, and do they run those photos through any AI technologies?
We do not.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, with my remaining minute, I just want to note that we are in what I think to be the crux of much of the discussions that we have around civil liberties pertaining to these witnesses. I would like to formally request that this committee consider extending this study for a day to have these members come back, because there is a line of questioning that I think deserves further depth, and given the fact that we're going to be called back to the House, I want to make sure that these gentlemen here have the ability to fully testify under this committee study.
Noted, and we'll have to assess our calendar, and I appreciate the importance of these witnesses. We have, I believe, time for 2 more meetings on this study. There are other competing witnesses, though, that other parties have requested. So we will.
I would also be happy to
under
suggest, Mr. Chair, that if they were to come back along with other committee members, that each, along with other witnesses, that we might be able to better fully examine the use.
Okay. Noted, and I will do my best to accommodate that, but we are constrained by the calendar, so I'll take that under advisement, certainly. With that, we are...
Point of order.
Okay, a quick one, if you may, please.
Just to note, Mr. Chair, that if the witnesses have further information to submit beyond their opening statements, and if they had interest in expanding on some of their answers, they are welcome to submit that information to the clerk, and will be distributed to the committee.
Indeed, the witnesses may do that, and I will note that until statements are translated, they can't be distributed to members. So the members, in some cases, were not privy to all of the opening statements that we received, even though they were submitted, but they are not distributed to members until they are translated. So with that, I thank our witnesses for coming today, and I'm sorry that this meeting. But activity in the House always takes priority, and when votes happen in the House, we've got to vote. So with that, I'll thank the witnesses for attending. They may leave the call, but I would ask members to just give me a minute to, first of all, I would ask the committee for a motion to approve the budget for this study, which was circulated, moved by Mr. Fergus.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Turek, go ahead.
I would just note in my examination of the budget and understanding the good work that our translators do, I'd certainly value an explanation as to why each headset is being charged at the cost of $175. That seems a lot, and I don't want to hold up the work, and I understand that our translators do good work, but
I think
I'll leave it at that.
That'll be a question maybe better put at liaison committee, but if you really want to go there. Is there any further discussion on the budget? All those in favor of the budget as distributed? Any opposed? The budget is carried. Last thing that I will remark on then before we go to vote is there was a draft first plan distributed to committee members for the travel proposal per the motion by Monsieur Villemeux. If anybody has any comments on that or concerns or objections, perhaps I would invite you to. I mean, if there are any now. All right. Well, let's move the adoption of the report as circulated. Mr. Fergus has moved. All those in favor of the proposal that was circulated. Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. With that, meeting adjourned.